With the 20th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Seattle Seahawks select Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver out of Ohio State. And much like the Devon Witherspoon pick, this one has caused some consternation in the Seahawks fan base, a little bit of a split. Those who really do love it, those who just are hating it, are angry at both of these two picks and can't understand what's going on in this first round. And I find myself a little bit in between. Overall, probably supportive at the end of the day, though, when it's all said and done. And much like the Devon Witherspoon pick, there's a lot to unpack on this particular pick, I think, because of some of the fervor that exists around it and where people are thinking and how they believe on it, because everyone is tremendously passionate on both of these two picks. I can feel that in my chat when I'm doing my live stream. And so when we look at Jaxon Smith-Njigba, what are we first looking at? What are we getting? Well, you have a guy who last year wasn't able to play a lot of games. A hamstring injury basically cost him his whole season. But the prior year, he was absolutely dynamite. 90 plus catches, 1,600 yards, 9 touchdown receptions on an offense that had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson operating on the outside. He was tremendous in his production in that respect of things. And indeed, if he had come back this year and put up another 90 catch season with 1,500 yards, probably would have been a top 12 pick. You probably don't see him even there at 20 at that point. So in my opinion, there is some good value on the surface of this. I think that if we hadn't taken him here, I think it's very likely the Chargers would have taken a look at Jaxon Smith on the very next selection, as they did go wide receiver. Hell, there were a run of 4 receivers after Jaxon there. So one of those teams probably would have taken Jaxon. If not us, somebody would have. And what you're getting with this guy, I think, is a guy who not only is going to be a good slot receiver into the future, but who should be a very good slot receiver right from the jump. If he ascended to becoming a top 5 slot receiver in this league immediately in his first year, it would not surprise me. My comp for him is Amon St. Brown, the Detroit Lions slot receiver that they were able to get a little bit more in the middle rounds a couple of years ago, but who has been very tremendously productive for him, almost automatic light. Operating out of that slot, and how he's able to be as productive as he is, where it's like, are you guys even trying to cover this guy? Like, what's going on out here? Jackson's got that same thing going on. And when you look at the pro day numbers, which are a little bit of a split there, because the pro day numbers showed off first the short area burst, the quickness, the change of direction, the stop and start, the 3-cone showed that, the shuttle showed that. He is elite in that standpoint. He was an elite tester in that standpoint, and it matches up to what you see on the tape with him, where he is so sudden in and out of his cuts there from the slot. He kind of has, in a lot of ways, an ideal kind of skill set there for the slot in his makeup and his build and his physical profile. So it's very good in that respect of things. And you have to acknowledge, when looking at the slot in this given offense, the offense being a West Coast offense, it is mightily important. It's just not kind of important like, yeah, you might have viewed it in the prior offense we were sort of running here with Russell Wilson. It is very much at the forefront of something that's got to be a key part to your offense, because with the West Coast offense, it's about moving the chains. It's not the bigger boom bust thing that we did last time with the Russell offense, just going back referencing that. It's more about just keeping the ball matriculating up the football field. And to do that, you need the third down guy to get it done. You need the slot guy to get it done. You can't just keep relying on DK and Tyler on the outside to carry that day all the time, especially with as often as they get double teamed. And I really went back in my memory and thinking about this pick to Mike Holmgren's days. And when you had Bobby Ingram here as a slot, and you had these receivers through that time that were highly talented guys, the second round pick that was Darrell Jackson, the first round pick that was Corn Robinson, Joe Jurevicius is having a really good year for us one year in 2005. But throughout that whole time period, the steady metronome of the offense was Bobby Ingram operating out of that slot, moving those chains so then Sean Alexander could then bust off those big runs. And now you have that guy brought to bear into this offense in a way that you haven't had recently. Dwayne Eskridge, for as talented as he's been, came into this league with 3 main question marks on his back: the injury situation, his route running, and his ability to catch. None of those 3 things have been answered in his time here through the first couple of years. And I think this team is acknowledging a little bit with this pick that they're maybe not going to come to bear fruitful-wise as it stands. And as much as I do like Tariq Young and do feel like the team is very high on that kid, I think he's going to be more of an outside guy at the next level. He's not necessarily a pure slot guy in his size, build, and his makeup. So now you're going to more of something that is kind of is a need on this team in a subtle way. But a guy who's going to be a very useful player for you immediately and in the long term and to what your offense absolutely needs. So to me, there is some sense to how this pick comes to bear, as well as when you look at the value of the pick, because a lot of people are really wringing their hands a little bit over the fact of should have gone for the defensive lineman, should have gone for one of these other guys. There was Brian Breesy, there was Miles Murphy, there was Maze Smith. And indeed, those guys ended up going in the back of the first round. So to have taken them at 20 certainly wouldn't have been a tremendous reach. But like I said with Jaxon there a second ago, he was also going to go very likely afterwards. And this team's assessment of those defensive linemen may be that they see them very closely in alignment to the guys that are available in the second and third round. And they may have viewed Jaxon Smith as this separating, difference-making talent at the slot from the other slot receivers in this draft. For whether I have the same evaluation of Witherspoon or Jaxon Smith that the team does, or you may not have the same evaluation that the team does, this is where I think they viewed it. And it's where I come back again to ultimately lending my support to the team on these two picks because of the fact that I think what they've done in their foundations of their philosophy in this draft to start things off is replicate exactly what they tried to do last year, which is leaning into the value of their board, just trusting the value of their board purely. And last year, the value of their board perfectly met need. When you took Charles Cross at number 9 as a left tackle, you had a perfect need for a left tackle at the very same time. Same thing was true with Abraham Lucas in the third round with the value of the pick you took there. And you can go throughout the draft, and it was that way time and time again. Unfortunately, the first two picks that we've made this year just happen to be for positions where we do have other players there at that spot. But it doesn't mean that was the most valuable player at the top of the Seahawks board when they made that selection. And I just keep coming down to, after watching all these drafts for so many decades, that it is really the teams that have the greatest ultimate success draft after draft that can lean towards value rather than reaching for need. And so I think that when we look at the totality of this draft from our Seattle Seahawks, because they're operating from such a smart base standpoint in their fundamentals, that will mean when we look at the totality of this draft from end to end and all 10 picks, that we'll end up saying this was a successful draft. Maybe it's not as hit it up into the second deck of the stadium like last year's draft was, but it'll be just solid, get it up over the fence. And that might be just enough to help galvanize this team, to help shoot this team forward on into the future to becoming elite once again. So hopefully you guys like the pick. Hopefully I can sell you a little bit more on the pick, but don't question this. The kid will be productive and he will be a good player for this Seahawks team, much like Devin Witherspoon will be as well. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.